I'm giving the person listening the quick rundown of our short and very turbulent, but also very exciting business relationship so far. I met Matthew during the school games in February when I was playing because he was interviewing all the winners and I was leading at that moment. Jumped on a podcast with him, immediately vibed, and I started to feel like, oh, I love podcasting. There is something about this. And we kind of stayed connected. And I found out that he has a podcast management service. Actually, I inquired about that because I really loved how he was running it and the setup. Hired him, started to record the podcast. Dream come true for me. You just had your successful management firm. You were doing, I think, the School Games podcast voluntarily. And then shortly after, when my podcast started growing rapidly, you fired me because you got a better offer. So for the person listening, what's your growth journey? What's the massive momentum that's happening right now? And how did we get here?
Yeah. So, I mean, the offer that I with tears in my eyes said, Evelyn, I'm so sorry, but I really have to take this, is to go full time with Skool and to be doing what I was doing in a kind of voluntary, just curiosity, passion project capacity, to do that full time. And so, yeah, like having the chance to spend more and more time with the team and with Sam Ovens and with even just like other amazing winners like you, I'm like, I feel like I've found my people. And when you find your people, you have to just go deep into it. And something that I'll probably talk a lot about this whole conversation is going deep instead of going wide. And that's like, I think that's like my core life message, is to go deep, not wide, in pretty much every area of your life. And so, yeah, I'm delighted to have the table swapped over and be on the other side of the mic for a change. We were joking before recording. It's like, I can't even control any of the settings. It's like, I'm freaking out. So I'm in good hands today with yourself and looking forward to sharing.
Thank you so much. I think that's so beautiful. And when I made the decision to inquire to work with you, which I do very, very seldomly, Usually I'm being sold and I try to defend myself, but I was chasing you down to basically work with me for the podcast because I was immediately feeling the big love for what you do. And when you just said going deep, not wide, I remember that that's something that you mentioned to me in the onboarding multiple times.
Yeah.
On your growth journey, how did you discover the need for going deep instead of wide?
Yeah. So I'll take you back to probably like 7 years ago. My wife and I had just got done. We were actually serving as missionaries in New York City. So I worked there for 3 years. We were getting paid I think we had our accommodation and our Metro card or like subway pass. We were like getting $100 a month on top of that. So it was like, we were like scraping to the bone in terms of like our personal finances. And I moved back to Northern Ireland and I was working as a bicycle messenger, so like delivering things on my bicycle. And I really hated Northern Ireland, where I'm from, and I hated Belfast, especially growing up. And I think like having the 3 years away, I lived in Africa for a while. I lived in Nepal and Haiti doing like post-earthquake relief stuff. The social sector was like something that was very, very deeply rooted in me. My mom was a nurse and my parents were like incredibly religious, and community was a huge part of our family growing up. And so I always had that in me. And like a lot of kind of like teenagers, I wanted to like change the world and make a dent in the universe. And I hated the education system and I hated money, and capitalism was the worst thing ever. And so I went traveling and went off on that kind of journey. So we ended up back in Northern Ireland. I said I would never go to Northern Ireland again. And then when we got married, it's like, we're only here for 3 months just because it's really cheap. We like bought our wedding on Groupon. We're like, this is purely just to like a stopover. And it was cycling around the city, and it was talking to the old grannies at the bus stop and the chefs in the kitchens and the baristas behind the counters, where I really started to fall in love with Belfast. And at that point, stories were always a really important part of my life. I read like an absolute maniac whenever I was a kid. I was always consuming stories, and on the nonprofit quest, all I was doing was just talking to people like every single day, 16 hours a day. I had like 6 roommates in a 2-bed New York City apartment in Washington Heights. I would deal with like Wall Street, super, super wealthy people trying to raise money. And then like 2 hours later, I would be working with like drug addicts and homeless. And so I just loved like really drawing out the treasure and drawing out the story of literally anybody. I actually didn't really care who it was, whether they were like super fancy or like, a drug addict on the side of the road. I just was always curious about stories. And I think like asking questions was like a way for me to learn more about myself, and it still is today. It's why I'm obsessed with podcasting, because it's this crazy medium where you can just ask the questions that you want to the people that you want to ask them to. It's like if you went back in time and like told like a caveman about this, they would literally be like, this is witchcraft, that you can stand here in your garden shed in Northern Ireland on a sunny day and just like talk to people and ask them any question you want. It's crazy. But I was cycling around Belfast. I really loved Humans of New York. It was like a really big Instagram page back in the day. And I was like, Belfast needs this. So I like took my phone like while I was like cycling around, and I would like take pictures and show people parts about the city that they didn't know about. I just fell in love with Belfast, like a huge energy, very like entrepreneurial spirit, a really special moment. Like we had a civil war for many, many years that finished the year I was born. And so there was just this massive kind of like upswing, and like everyone was excited about Belfast. I got excited. So I was like, dude, I'm going to start Humans of New York. So I started like going around taking photos. And I know you'll think this is hilarious. Like I became like an influencer in Northern Ireland. So like I think it was like 30,000 followers on Instagram. And like we were going to all the cool events. And I'm not that guy. Like you've seen the way I dress in real life. It's like, I'm not that guy. I'm a dad now, because then I can just lean into it's like, yeah, I'm an uncool dad, but I've like always been an uncool dad. And so I just felt like very out of place, and like it felt very inauthentic. And I'd be trying to like have these deep conversations with people, and they would just be like throwing stuff up on their stories. I was like, this sucks. And I had started the podcast. I bought like a £30 microphone. It was in the back of my delivery bag, and I would just cycle around places and interview people. And really, the whole online world stuff really started to kind of burn me out. I was like, I hate always being on social media. I hate always being on my phone. It felt so disconnected from who I really am and disconnected from the things that I really value. And so I actually just deleted everything. I like made a very, very like thought through decision with like calculations and numbers on the back of napkins and spreadsheets. And I was like, I'm putting at least 20 hours per week into social media. What would I do if I had 20 hours? Like if someone gave me the gift of 20 hours, how would I spend it? And I remember thinking, I would do podcasting full time. I would just interview people, and that's all I'd want to do. And then also I had like a huge friendship network. Like I was very well connected. And I was like, well, what if I just stripped that down to like 5 core people? And what if I made the commitment that I only see these 5 people every single week? And if I haven't seen all 5 people, I can't see anybody else. So that's where I like really made the decision to go deep, not wide. I turned my podcast from a monthly show into a weekly show, and I went on this journey that's really lasted, to be honest with you, it's lasted a full 7 years, where I've been like super below the radar. Like people are kind of like, did he have a mental breakdown? Where is this guy? Is he doing something anymore? And I've just been really, really, really quietly just like, honing my craft, doing my thing, living with my family, living with my core 5 people. And it's totally transformed me as a person. And on this deep, not wide journey, it was the thing where I discovered podcasting, and podcasting has been my key that's literally just unlocked the whole entrepreneurial world for me. So, yeah.
Is that where the group name came from on Skool, the podcast key?
Because yeah, so our podcast business, which now is no more, which has just been sold and acquired by a really amazing company, a huge competitor of ours, who I love and I've been looking up to for years. But yeah, it's the podcast key, because for me, it literally was the key that unlocked everything. I said earlier, like questions for me, they're a key that literally goes into people's brains and just unlocks. Actually, not even the brains. Like you can like unlock somebody's heart if you know the right key. And so the right question is like a really powerful way to do that. So yeah, the business and the group on Skool is called the Podcast Key. And it's because I think like it's the way to unlock like business success. I think it's the way to unlock personal success. And that's just been my journey. So like, yeah, I'm biased.
That's so cool. When did you, so I'm trying to kind of get a feel for it. First you had the Instagram, like a theme page, right? And then eventually you picked up podcasting. What was like the first moment? When did you get hooked? Did you listen to podcasts and then you were like, I'm doing this myself? Did you get interviewed on a podcast like I did? Or how did you get your first hit?
Yeah. So in New York City, like I said, I was broke. I had no money. I started listening to this show called The Ramsey Show. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Oh yeah,
Its
he's
name's
saving. He does the savings, right?
yeah, it's like budget, like get out of debt, like become financially free. Like he's been doing it for like 50 years or something ridiculous. And I had like an iPod Touch,
Mm-hmm.
and walking is like one of my biggest passions outside of podcasting and my family. I
Mm-hmm.
love to walk, and so I used to love just like hours and hours and hours of my days off, just like walking around New York, and I love listening to stuff. And so I found this Ramsey show and I binged it, and it was like mini heroes' journeys every single episode, and you go through the whole roller coaster of emotions. And I was just like, this is better than TV because I
Mm-hmm.
can walk and do it at the same time, and I kind of feel like I'm learning something along the way. So
Mm-hmm.
the Ramsey show led me to like a lot of guys who got into podcasting early, led me to the Tim Ferriss show.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably have listened to like at least 300 episodes of Tim Ferriss.
Wow.
Tim Ferriss led me to Seth Godin, and then I just consumed every single thing on the planet that Seth Godin's ever put out. And I fell in love with that way of business. And I was cycling, I would do 12-hour shifts as a bicycle messenger. I'd be cycling around Belfast, like maybe 100 kilometers a day, nothing like too crazy. And the whole time I would just listen to podcasts. So my reps of podcasts is just like through the roof. Podcasts, audiobooks. It's funny. If I still go to like little parts of the city that I haven't been to for a while, I'll have like an audio flashback of what I was listening to whenever I was in that moment. It's almost like my memories are like scattered across the city of Belfast. I'd be like, I remember that Tim Ferriss episode, and then I got chicken wings after that. So it's funny even now whenever I like go around the city, it's like all these little like lessons and reminders from my past just like pop up. So yeah, I think really it was Tim Ferriss. He was the one that got me into like entrepreneurial podcasts, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
bro, the hero's journey, like it's so rich. And I was like, I want to tell hero's journey style stories. And podcasting for me, I think, is the easiest way and the most powerful way to do so, because it really takes an hour of your time.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to know how to set up a camera, especially nowadays. Like the industry's changed so much since whenever even I started. It's like
Mm-hmm.
now you just need like an internet connection, and you can use your phone or your laptop, and the quality is really good.
Yeah, that's so true. So you fell in love with podcasting first, and then eventually you were like, I would like to do this. When did you say, I would like to do this for a living and it's a real possibility? When did it kind of dawn on you that there's probably a way to monetize this love for podcasting?
So I think, had like an artist mentality where all I wanted to do was just make my art. And I actually couldn't care less about the business or the money, to my detriment. Like if I look back to my early years, like I actually deprioritized the money so much that it hurt me. And I was so fortunate that like my wife at the time, my wife now, the job my wife was in at the time, there's a good clarification. She was working full time as a nurse, and she was like working her ass off, and I was working as a bicycle messenger. I think I was on like £7 an hour or something. And like I worked hard for money, as so many people listening to this do. And I think if I had have realized the whole entrepreneurship leverage thing sooner, I could have had a lot less stressful nights where I would be lying in bed like worrying about money. Sometimes I even remember like I would wake up sometimes like 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep, and I would just like walk around Belfast. We lived in the city centre at the time, and I would just like try to dream and scheme like, what are we going to do? How are we going to get out of this? And so for me, I just wanted to make just enough money so I could keep podcasting myself as much as possible. And it was only whenever one of my guests, so the podcast I started was called Best of Belfast. It was all about celebrating Northern Ireland and the incredible people in it. And we probably did like 100 episodes, maybe like 150 episodes. And we started to like, the quality of our guests started to get really, really good. A lot of them were CEOs, a lot of them were entrepreneurs. And then they started being like, hey, like you're really good at this. Like, could you do this for us? Like, could you make a podcast for my startup? And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I have no idea how to do this, but I've listened to enough Tim Ferriss episodes where I know that the answer should be yes, absolutely no problem at all.
Yeah.
So really cool. I had my first ever like commercial client in the podcast space was a guy called Mark Dowds, and he came to me, and he's like a big time entrepreneur in the Belfast scene. He's exited multiple startups, really awesome guy. And he basically said, look, here's the thing, Matthew, I want to show up 5 minutes late to the Zoom recording. I don't want to have to done any prep. I don't even want to have interacted with the guest. I don't want to touch an editing suite. I literally want to show up for the 1 hour and you do everything else. I was like, okay. And so I had kind of accidentally built out the workflow, how to do that by myself. And I had done the 150 reps for my own show. So that whenever I started doing it for him, it was like relatively easy. And for context, like my first 10 episodes took me at least 30 hours per episode. Like they were big, meaty, problematic workflows where my computer would crash. I had this old clunky laptop at the time and a legal version of Adobe, and it all would just crash and not work. And it was just, I would be making shorts and video and it would just be so difficult. And I got the workflow down like really, really well. Started to build a system, read a really good book that I still love called The E-Myth, where it really taught me about systems and how you can turn every business into McDonald's, which at the time I was like, no, my artistic business is not McDonald's. But then I was like, systems are a really good thing. So that's how it started. And then like more people started asking. And then somehow we started to get customers that weren't connected to Belfast. And then somehow we started to get customers around the world. And yeah, we kind of accidentally built this podcast agency, which was never, ever in my journey, but it provided the finances to allow my wife to be a full-time mum whenever our kids came along. And that was like it was a lifelong dream of hers. And actually, like I knew that from the day that I met Jackie. And so having that kind of pressure in the back of my head was really good because I knew, I was like, I have 3 years to figure this out. Like I have 3 years to make a way so that Jackie doesn't have to work if she doesn't want to.
Honestly, this almost gives me tears because I know how meaningful it is because I had the pressure I made myself when I knew my son was on the way. So that's such a beautiful gift to be able to provide for someone because this is really such a precious time. So that's so beautiful that you were able to do that. So part of you must have thought still, I want a podcasting, but maybe there is a way with podcasting to figure it out. Or was it never on your mind? Or was there the hope?
So I really enjoyed running the agency and I learned, I mean, you know this more than anyone, you're the queen of this. It's like when you teach someone how to do something is whenever you truly learn what the thing is. And so I really enjoy honing my craft as a podcaster. I enjoy the systems behind it. I enjoy, how do you structure an interview? How do you make a guest feel comfortable? How do you templatize your personal growth journey that I've experienced in my own life for other people? So I got a real buzz out of that. But the bigger and bigger my agency became, the further and further it took me away from my craft. And my craft is having conversations. Like, don't forget, that's the artist. It's like the artist who like set out to like paint beautiful paintings. And then in a way, and I don't mean to disrespect you or anyone that we've worked with, I was painting the walls of someone else's building. Whenever I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if like I could just do this? Like do the craft that I want to do. And that's a super luxurious, privileged thing to say. But I did always have it in the back of my head. And so where I was at in the agency was, how do I do less and less? And so the bits that I really enjoyed was meeting new customers, onboarding new customers. And then after that, I was kind of like, I'm not in my zone of like unique ability or my zone of genius. Like what I can bring to the table, I think is like a clear understanding of like positioning and how a podcast can actually serve a business and how you can make it profitable and how you can make it really easy for you and like frameworks and creative and ideas. But then the actual implementation of it, it's not me. Like I've done enough personality tests to know that I'm really good at the quick, at the fast, at the super, but then it's like the implementation is where like I start to become gray. And when I become gray, it's not good. So that was my journey with podcasting. And then I started to have a team and I got bigger and bigger. And then you're responsible for more people and you're kind of like, wow, like, I don't know. I know that we would have made it through. I would have found great people and I would have hired a managing director or a CEO and we would have hired amazing account managers. But also it's like at the Hermosi Day that you were at in
Mm-hmm.
Vegas, like they talked a lot about makers versus managers.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like, I'm also not a great manager. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think I have no problem saying this. I think I'm a really, really good leader. I think I'm a really awful manager. And I just realized that I was doing like, I was being more in that manager lane rather than the maker lane.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was tension that I was feeling for a long time. And I guess that's probably, I never really thought about it. That's why I love podcasting, because I'm an external processor. I
Yeah.
guess in a way, my eyes were really wide open to like, what is the next step? Like, what is the quantum leap that will
Mm-hmm.
take me to the next place?
I think this is so interesting because I feel like when we grow, we start to add layers because we try to find means to justify our craft, right? And so we're making it viable. And then as you kind of progress through this and you're in a position where you can breathe and where you have built something around that craft, you can start to peel them back and you can start
Yeah.
to reclaim that room and really sit in that essence of you. And I feel like I am in this phase right now. And it's still a lot of, like Nicole said, struggle between the butterfly and the caterpillar cells. But I feel like it's almost like a second birth once you allow yourself to fully lean into, I'm the artist. I suck at people management. I don't want to do it. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's a beautiful time when you can actually own this. And I think there must have been something in you giving you a hunch that there is the opportunity with Skool to get closer to this. Because from what I understand or understood also during the games was you did this completely voluntarily, right? So
it's a wild story to be honest with you. I still like can't believe it when I like look back, and it's not that long ago. It's maybe like 3 or 4 months,
mm-hmm,
So we had an annual planning meeting, me and the
mm-hmm,
team. We went to like a lovely little cottage, one of our customers up in the north of Ireland, and like middle of nowhere, old Irish cottage, hot tub, like just like perfect, off grid, amazing. And we were really thinking like, what is the future? And I remember like coming to the team with actually quite a lot of frustration, where I was like, I feel like I have more to give
mm,
in terms of the real, like, there's lots of people who can edit podcasts. There's literally millions of people.
mm-hmm,
But the thing that I felt like I was being pulled more and more, both from a heart level and in terms of a value level. And like, I want to teach people, like I want to coach people. And I wouldn't have even had that word coach until I met you. But it's like, I am an educator. Like I love to teach people and I love to help people move along the journey. It's
mm-hmm.
also one of the reasons why I love podcasting, because it's a little bit like therapy sometimes.
Oh
If
yeah.
you like get deep enough with people where you can actually like help them unlock things in their brain. Like my favorite drug is whenever I'm doing a podcast, and they're like, oh, I never would have thought about it that way. That's exactly what it is. And I'm like, cha-ching. Like I've just done what I feel like I was born on this earth to do. And
Mm-hmm,
so I was there with the team and I was saying, like, we really need some sort of leverage. I can't one-on-one people. I can't onboard a million people. It's like, what would it look like if we could launch 10,000 shows this year for free? Like, we have the systems, we have the playbook, we have the SOPs, we've got it all. Like, what would that look like? And so we started throwing out names. Maybe Kajabi, maybe a Facebook group, maybe this, maybe that. And I was like, okay, so this was really, really on my brain. And none of them, I looked at all of them, I was like, nah, it's not right. It just doesn't. And then lo and behold, I'm on the internet one day. Alex Ramosi starts wearing a different hat, and it's this thing, and it says Skool on the top of it. I'm like, what the heck is Skool? And I log onto the platform, and I know it sounds like really cliche and romanticized at this stage, but like I logged onto the platform and I knew this was it. Like in my bones, like everything in me said, this is where you need to be. I can't explain it. Like it's
No, no.
happened to me like a million times, but like it was extremely powerful.
This is so cool because I literally had a very similar experience. How I found Skool was I was listening to Alex Ramosi. I was like, what's that hat? Let me check. What is Skool? Games? I'm game.
You're like, I'm in, let's go. And so
I
what
literally,
happened?
same moment, like, we have to do this. So you were like, I
Yeah.
have to do this.
100%. So like what happened next might shock you. I love going walking. And so I logged into school. This is no joke, like how the synchronicity of everything is wild. And pinned at the very top of School Community was Max Pearson's 7-hour school masterclass. And it was like literally like the 20th of February, I don't know, school. It's on my public school profile, my first day. Mm-hmm. That day, I literally woke up at like 5 a.m. I went for a walk. It was snowing. I had my boots and my rain and my big jacket on. And I listened to the full 7-hour masterclass in one go. And I literally felt like I was about to take off the ground and start flying. I was like almost shaking. I was like, this is it. And so I came back on. I came into the office. This is a like garden shed thing here, which I'll probably talk about later. And I logged on to school. And it's kind of like there's a story in the Bible about like the feeding of the 5,000 where Jesus turns like a little boy's packed lunch into like feeds like a whole crowd. And the lesson that I always pull from that is that you just have to show up with what you have. So there's this little boy and he's got like, I think it's like 5 pieces of bread and like 3 fishes or something like that. Don't quote me. And you know, I think the question is just like, does anyone have anything to eat? And this little boy, like so pure, so innocent, like just comes forward with like these little like bread and fish. And he's like, I have this. And like the thing that's always resonated with me about that story is like, just come with what you have. And so I put a post up in the school games. I'll find it for you. It's so crazy. I was like, hey guys, we're launching the School Games podcast. Like, who's in? And like that was it. Like I had no podcast, I had no plan, I had no nothing. I literally just put the post up and like 50 people commented. They're like, yeah, this is so awesome. Yeah, me. I was like, oh my goodness. So I like messaged the team. I was like, we need to launch a podcast in the next 48 hours. I was like, someone build the Calendly, someone get the logo, someone do this. And we just like stole the school names, stole the school logo, like literally just like, and like messaged Andrew Kirby. I was like, hey, you're hosting the games. Do you want to be the first guest? And I remember sitting down with the team and I was like, look, we have like a million things we need to focus on right now. Shiny object syndrome is a real thing. Let's lay a fleece out. Let's lay a test. And it was like, if Andrew Kirby comes on the podcast, we're going to do this. So it was like Sunday night, like, because I didn't have any time during my work hours to do this. So it was like 8 p.m. I drove down to the studio in Belfast, paid one of the guys, Daniel, overtime. I was like, can you help me do the recording and all? And we're sitting there and it's like 2 minutes to recording. And I'm like, he's not going to show up. And then it's like 8 o'clock. Nobody's there. And I literally said to Daniel, it's like, okay, well, I guess I heard wrong. I felt wrong. It's not right. Let's just forget about it. And then it's like, ding, Andrew Kirby has joined the lobby. And I'm like, oh, it's about to happen. So we interviewed Kirby. I'm like super nervous. Like at this stage, I've done like 600 plus interviews. I'm so nervous. I can't explain it. So kind of fumble my way through the interview, and then we do like 4 of them, and then it just starts to go from there. And so we end up doing, I think it's like 30 episodes, totally for free, totally unofficial. I'm working like 7 p.m. to midnight, Monday to Friday. I throw my kids into bed, I kiss my wife goodnight, and I'm in this garden shed doing interviews. And I'm editing because we don't have enough editors because they're all focused on client work. And I don't know why. I just fully committed. I was like, and I had no idea what the end outcome would be. I think at that stage it was like, yeah, it would be cool to like interview Hermosi. I think that was like as far as my brain went. And then one thing led to the other. And now we're full-time with school. We run their official podcast and we're like, we're doing this thing full-time.
This is so cool. I think that you have, maybe this is something you can give to the person reading, because I think what you have done is something that so many people don't dare to do, which is just investing without any guarantee, like with the hope and the actual potentiality of getting, the positive outcome, not even knowing what it is, but just trusting that there will be a return. Yeah. Hopefully. How can you give that to the person reading? Because I think that's so powerful when you can tap into that enthusiasm and just do it for the sake of it.
Well, that's what it was. I was doing it for the sake of it. Like I was doing it because I loved it and I was obsessed. And I was like, and think about this from my shoes as well. Like, I'm a Belfast podcaster. I've done 600 interviews. Most of my people are like from Northern Ireland. I had the chance to interview some really big people, like lifelong heroes, remotely, but it was like once a quarter. And now all of a sudden, it's like I'm interviewing like Evelyn from Austria and Max from Sweden, and I'm flying to LA and I'm interviewing Sam Ovens, and I'm in Vegas interviewing Hamza, and it's like so. School give me access to do my craft and the thing that I love on a way bigger stage than I ever had the opportunity of doing up until this point. And so for me, it was like someone buying an artist a bigger canvas or like giving them like the most expensive paintbrushes in the world, where it's like, I can now do what I feel like I'm on this earth to do and reach more people. And, and like the YouTube channel grew to like 1,000 people in like 30 days. There's like something ridiculous like that. And I was like, as a creator, when you're doing something that's adding value, and like the comments, like inside the community of like the people who were getting so much value from this, it's like, how could I ever stop? You know what I mean? I'll find it nearly impossible to walk away from that as a creator. But the reality was, I was on like a very short runway. Like I really probably had like 3 more weeks in me before I had lunch with Sam and we had the conversation about like doing this properly. And I even remember saying to Kirby, like, I don't know if you remember, like Andrew Kirby started doing live calls with the winners of the school games.
Oh yeah, when you were saying,
month.
I'm not sure if they're not gonna do it themselves or something.
And I literally remember even saying to Kirby on a call, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna do the podcast anymore. Like, it looks like you guys might have it covered. And so there were so many times throughout the journey, and like, I don't want to play a violin because I'm in like the most privileged position in the world, but like, I've got like a wife and 2 kids, and I'm like putting all this work in, and I'm like spending money. I'm like flying to LA, and then like Sam's like, "Do you want to come to Vegas?" I'm like, "Yes," and I'm spending this money to go to Vegas, and like it is getting to the point where my wife's kind of looking at me, and she's like, "Do you know what you're doing? Like, are you sure this is going to work?" And all I had was just like, I feel like it has to work. The thing I kept saying, and like Mark and Daniel on the team will know this, I just kept saying, why would we have got this far for it to end here? That's just I literally, it became like a mantra. I was like, why would I be able to sit down with Sam Ovens in LA and do like an hour-long interview that he posts on his YouTube channel and it gets 30,000 views? If that was the end of the road, like it's the hero's journey. It's like, I've listened to enough stories to know it's like the story can't end here. It's like the laws of Hollywood storytelling demand that it just can't end here. And so, foolishness, hope, passion, blindness, I just kept going.
This is so beautiful. You were like, this is the dark before the dawn.
Yes, honestly, it was like the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. This tiredness right now is just the dragon that I need to slay, and on the other side of the dragon, it's like there's the treasure, and it's like da-da-da. But you really don't know, and I think the hero's journey ultimately it's the story of faith. It's the story of, I think this might work. I think this might be worth it. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna try anyway. And like in every good story, if there's not a chance that you're going to fail, it's not a story. Like one of my friends, Mark, he's got an amazing line. He says, the difference between a story and an anecdote is that in an anecdote, things just happen, but in a story, you change. So it's like, unless there's transformation in a story, it's not actually a story. It's just a series of events that you can write down. But it's the story is like where you want to be living your life. And unfortunately / fortunately, that means that like you have things on the line that you can lose.
This is so good. There are 2 questions that I would love for you to maybe bring closer to the person listening. The first one is, you have been in times when money was really, really tight, right? When there was scarcity. How did you hold on to your artist heart and to doing the podcast? What made you keep reinvesting and showing up even in times when it almost wasn't an option?
Honestly, I just separated it. So Best of Belfast, I made the decision like 3 years into Best of Belfast. I'd say my first 3 years was just like, how can I go full time with Best of Belfast? How can I do it? And what about this? And what about this? And I literally would spend like 90% of my creative energy like trying to figure out how to monetize Best of Belfast. And then one day, it became so clear to me, like the penny dropped. I was like, you should never, ever ask Best of Belfast to pay for your family to do anything. And see, the freedom that brought me was like, wow, because Best of Belfast then moved straight from my head back into my heart. And it's like, this is my passion project. This is my art. Okay, maybe to use the painting metaphor, maybe I'm going and painting walls all day, but at nighttime I get to come home and I get to paint a beautiful landscape. And so I did lots of stuff before. Like you, I started off this whole thing as a writer. So I always wanted to be an author, always wanted to be a novelist, actually. And I injured my knee whenever I was a bicycle messenger and I couldn't work anymore. And I was super scared. That scarcity mindset, like that hot stress on the back of your neck. Like you feel like your blood is like going to come out of your eyes. And I remember like I was so scared. I was cycling home and I literally was looking in the shop windows of like every single shop I went by. It's like, is anyone hiring? And I stopped in a restaurant. I literally said, guys, can I work here? And they literally went, do you have hospitality experience? I was like, yeah. They're like, yeah, okay, can you start tomorrow? And like literally the next day I like started like working in a restaurant. And I was that night when I got the job, I went home. This sounds so silly. I like I saw an ad on like Facebook or something and it was like, do you want to work online and make money from your home? Like the scammiest of all scammy things. I was like, yes, anything. I'll do anything. And I clicked on it and it was like a SEO blogger agency where you would just write SEO articles. And I was like, I can write. I'm a good writer. I could do this. So I like onboarded with them super quick. And I just started writing like mad. I went in the next day. I did one shift in the restaurant. I said, guys, I'm really sorry. I found something else. And they're like, guy, what the heck? Like, and that was really hard for me because I'm like, I like to think I'm a very loyal person when I commit, blah, blah, blah. So I had to get over all that. I started writing like crazy. So I was writing like 30,000 words a week. I think I was getting paid like $50 a blog post. So it was just like volume. So I had copywriting and I was doing copywriting. And then that led to like doing like more brand stuff and more high-end copywriting. And then the podcast thing was run along beside it. So I had other ways to make money that didn't revolve around the podcast. So whenever I made that divorce where it was like, keep the creative, keep the passion, and then just make money, like brutal, black and white, zeros and ones on that side, that's how I feel like I was able to keep my artistic integrity. And I did a whole bunch of other stuff, which is just ridiculous looking back on hindsight. Like I ended up doing a PhD. So I have a PhD in creative writing. So I ended up writing a novel. And I did that like in the mornings, like 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. before the kids woke up for 3 years. It was just silly. Like put myself under a lot of stress, a lot of work. I was running the business full time as well and all this sort of stuff. But really interesting. So that was a very important moment for me because my novel was actually, full circle, about a bicycle messenger in Belfast.
Oh, wow.
So I was really able to like marry a lot of that like passion together. And it also taught me a very important lesson. And it's a very long way of learning this lesson where I don't want to be a novelist. I love podcasting too much. And I think maybe I have to live another 50 years before I can be a good author. That's kind of like what I have in my head. It's like I'm in my first mountain. And this first mountain is digital storytelling and podcasting. And hopefully I have enough life experience that later in my life I can come back to writing books. But the fact that I was able to go full passion into things like the novel, full passion into Best of Belfast, it allowed me to really get my art on while like still being involved in this entrepreneurial space.
Would you say that it was the room that you gave it to not have to make money that ultimately led to it making money?
Yeah, well, I think if you like even the Skool podcast, like it was just pure passion. You know, and in a weird way, like Best of Belfast, like ended up making like decent money, like, you know, money that when I started off, I wouldn't believe. And I still have the mentality where it's like Best of Belfast doesn't need to make anything, but like all of a sudden, like money just kind of starts to fall. And I remember reading, it's like an old bank pamphlet. It's called like The Richest Man in Babylon. I don't know if you ever heard about it. And they have a quote where it's like, when money starts to come, it will come so easily and so quickly that you'll be wondering where the hell it was hiding all those years.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not saying like I'm not a multimillionaire by any stretch of the imagination, but like you do, like for someone listening to this, it's like you get deep enough into your journey and like it does just start to happen. And I know that sounds kind of wishy-washy, but I think that the passion and the sacrifice is just the currency that allows you to cash that in later on. Because it's as well, that's what this show is all about. It's because you transform into the type of person that has those opportunities and can see those opportunities and can take risks and have a little bit of business strategy and also have a little bit of blind faith that you just don't have whenever you're starting out. You know, you need the reps, and the reps is what actually allows you to become that type of person. So yeah,
absolutely beautiful. What is the number one thing that you would want anyone who is maybe starting out right now and doesn't have a lot of hope or is in a really dark spot in their business right now? What is the number one thing you would like them to hear or know about this whole thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, like when I was 11 years old, like I had a suicide attempt and I struggled with my mental health for like 15 years after then. And so all throughout the initial part of that entrepreneurial journey, I was still experiencing like extreme highs and extreme lows. Like if you were to properly diagnose me, it would be more in like the bipolar territory, where it's like you experience the extreme periods of mania, like super creative, and then you experience like the dark depths of depression and suicide thoughts and all this sort of stuff. So the hopelessness and the darkness is actually a very familiar voice for me. And so I can actually very easily understand exactly how that person is feeling. And in a way, I would say for me, it comes back to the deep, not wide, where all of us at some point, whether you are a 3-year-old girl like my daughter or you're Alex Hermosi, we all have a limit. There's always a ceiling that we will hit. And I think for me, I used to get really like freaked out in the past about like how high or how low that ceiling was. I think now I've like just come to like accept that like it doesn't really matter how high your ceiling is. Everyone deals with limitations and you just have to work with that. And to work with that, I think requires like a lot of grace for yourself. I think it requires a lot of accepting that things are going to take a long time. And also accepting the reality that it might not work. Like, you don't need to listen to 300 Tim Ferriss episodes to know that, like, most entrepreneurs don't make it work their first time. And so if you can pick something that gives you life, like I remember, like, you know, and I'm really fortunate, it's a story for another time, but like I have experienced like complete healing from like all mental health issues. I've been my life totally transformed a few years ago through some really special circumstances. And so now I know like what life is like without that, but I also know what life was like with that. And if you can find something that sustains you on the day by day, the something that like gives you energy, the something that makes you feel like you're operating with a sense of calling, that thing that you feel like you're on the earth to do. Like on my darkest days, like 5 years ago, where I could hardly bring myself to get out of bed. Like if I had a podcast booked, I would go. I'd never ever canceled the podcast because something happened to me, like when the red light went on, where it didn't matter what else was happening in my life. It's like I was in my moment. I was in my state of flow. And for those 90 minutes, I would experience like bliss. And it literally did not matter what was going on outside that. It literally was my like happy place. And so if you can go deep, not wide, and if you can find that thing, and it's like, let's de-romanticize it. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy and it's like never not going to be hard and blah, 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 blah. But if you can find a thing that like, actually the outcome really doesn't matter. It's like the process. It's something that like you could do forever. Then like just do that, because if you fail, it's like you have something that you've enjoyed. You have something that you're proud of. And that's the thing for me, like whether it was Best of Belfast or the School Games podcast, as it used to be known, like if it all failed, like if it hit 50 episodes and it stopped, I would be super proud of it. Mm-hmm. Like I would be on my deathbed and it would be like in my last moments, it would be like one of the 20 things I would think about, because I would be super proud of it. And if you can find that, then that's the thing that's going to allow you to sustain yourself for the long term. And sustaining yourself for the long term is the only way that you're going to experience success. So that's how I would reverse engineer it.
Thank you so much for sharing. I would love to keep asking you a million questions, but I think I will have to ask you if you would like to come back for another episode.
I'm always free. You know what? It's so funny. I'm like, because obviously like right now, like I actually edit all your episodes. Like I go through them. I make sure that they're good. And I was like, I'm really going to miss listening to Evelyn's podcast. And I was like, oh, bro, you can just listen to them like everyone else, like out on a walk. And I was like, bro, I'm so excited. So yeah, I'm really excited to see like where your podcast goes. I think you and I rhyme with each other. I'm not entirely sure exactly why, but there's always been like a lot of resonance. And so I think long form is really good for you. I think this type of storytelling is really good for you. And I think that, you know, your first 100 episodes are going to be a lot of fun. Let me say it that way.
Thank you so much. I just want to really thank you from my heart, because I know that this is not easy to share something like this, but I also know how much difference it will make for others to hear that this is not easy for anyone. And it's so easy to look at you and where you are right now. And you're such a smart, eloquent guy. And it's so easy to think that it just worked out for you. And it's so transparent and honest to help people understand what the journey honestly looks like. So I just want to appreciate you for that, and thank you.
100%. My final word would be do 100 episodes. If it's podcasting, do 100 episodes. If it's painting, do 100 paintings. Like, you can't really make the decision until you've done 100 of whatever it is. So your first 100, you just have to do them, and then you'll know where to go from there.
Fully agreed. You can't do 100 and still suck. It's not possible.